All right, guys, after the video that we had the other day, I knew that I had to cover this topic, so let's go ahead and jump right into this. We're going to talk about the Domination Index once again. You know this already from looking at the title of this video and at the thumbnail. So let's just stop mincing words and get straight into this. Here is that Domination Index spreadsheet again. You can see the team I have highlighted right here is the 2015 Toronto Blue Jays. Right, one of these things is not like the other, right? I think we can accept the 98 Yankees, 84 Tigers, 27-39 Yankees, of course, 95 Indians, of course, and the 2001 Mariners, despite the fact that they weren't necessarily so great. But the Toronto Blue Jays is the seventh best team in American League history is going to kind of make you scratch your head, finishing above the 1990 Oakland A's, the 69 Orioles, last year's Yankees team. We can talk about them a little bit later, 70 Orioles. We can talk about this team later, 2016 Red Sox. What we're seeing here are a lot of teams you would expect to be really, really big and high on the charts, with a couple odd exceptions. The 05 White Sox is another team we can talk about again. But let's talk here about the 2015 Blue Jays and see if we can figure out what's going on. I mean, they have a Domination Index rating of 3.394. It's mostly because of the excellence of their hitting. They had 891 runs scored and 670 runs allowed. Now, this is where it becomes interesting because the runs scored and runs allowed average is not equal, and that's because of interleague play. There must be a way to adjust for interleague play, and I bet that some of you probably have already thought of a good way to do this. I haven't yet. I can't think of a way of doing this other than doing a whole bunch of finicky mathematical computations that I would actually argue probably would complicate the process and would make things not as realistic as we want them to be. Very similar to having very finicky alterations in our simulation games to account for the fact that there were a few more triples hit in Comiskey Park in 1949 than any other park. If we're not careful with that, we can end up with too many triples being hit. If we're not careful with our adjustments here, we can end up exaggerating a difference that did exist, but maybe wasn't really that important. So because of that here, they end up having a standard deviation of runs scored of 62.907. So they wind up with a 2.876 runs scored total. Now, I'm curious, and it's going to take us, of course, a little while to have this completely measure the best offensive teams in American League history. I'm just curious to see where those 2015 Blue Jays rank, because they are ranking above every team I could see on that list. And look at that, they do rank above every single team in American League history. In other words, the 2015 Blue Jays had arguably the best offense in American League history relative to the rest of the league. Again, maybe there's something happening with interleague play, but boy, that would have to be one heck of a difference between the American League and National League to explain this, because every other team in the American League was also part of interleague play that year, and because we can see from the runs scored and runs allowed totals that the difference in the average wasn't that big. Now, the first thing I was wondering is, did I put the numbers in incorrectly? So I went over here, and let's see if we can do this right. Yeah, there we go. You can kind of see stuff, I believe. I went over here to a Baseball Reference and took a quick look at this. And what we want to look at is not necessarily the total as much as the average. And yes, the average run scored in 2015 American League was 710, according to Baseball Reference. Here we have 710.067. In terms of pitching, average number of runs allowed was 695 as opposed to 694.8, which leads me to conclude that the numbers that I have inputted are correct, are 100% correct, which is important to note. Blue Jays did score 891 runs, and they did give up 670. And so here you can see sort of the secret to success, at least as far as the Domination Index is concerned. If you have a team that is very good at scoring runs, maybe not the best team in history, but one of the best, or in this case, arguably the best team in history, and by actually quite a significant margin. And if you have a team that is good at not giving up runs, you're going to end up having one of the best teams of all time. It takes a little bit of both, right? That's sort of what happened with the 2015 Blue Jays and why they're ranked so high. Now, we can look at this. We can go over here and look at the runs allowed and see who is at the top of that chart. I'll tell you, the Blue Jays will probably not show up very high on the chart at all. And see if we can figure out what exactly is going on. Yeah, look at that. It's the 67 White Sox who end up with the highest runs allowed differential, followed by the 1990 Oakland Athletics. Now, the Athletics we know a lot about. The 23 Yankees we do as well. 67 White Sox are an interesting team to have up there, especially since offensively they were below average, but they were definitely above average in terms of defense. You might wonder why I would not say, hey, maybe it has something to do with the ballpark, has something to do with Comiskey Park and stuff like that. Well, I don't think anyone would say Fenway in 99 was a great pitcher's ballpark, first of of all, or Houston in 2022 or 2018, or Toronto in 85 for that matter. But the other thing that I want to say about this is that when you're looking at these larger numbers, when you're looking at this over the full course of the season, that home field advantage kind of washes out in the numbers because only half of your games are played at home, the other half are played on the road, right? And also because if you saw this huge offensive advantage one way or another, very low offensive totals or very high offensive totals, it would again come out in the wash. You have to play against another team in all of your home games, right? So the advantage might sort of be there, but not really. This method is going to tell us overall who the best teams are. 67 White Sox are a very underrated team. I'd love to play with that team in a replay. It'd be very interesting. Now we're going to go over here and take a quick look at the 2015 American League. I'll be honest with you, I don't remember paying very much attention to baseball in 2015. I paid some attention, but not the way that I did in when I was a kid in the early or mid 90s. I do remember this Blue Jays team who actually did not have the best record in baseball. That belonged to the Kansas City Royals. Royals are interesting because, they didn't score quite as many runs. They're much closer to league average. Their pitching was a little bit better than the Blue Jays and not giving up runs, but they're not going to be anywhere close in the Domination Index because they didn't score almost 200 runs above the league average, right? And so what we remember about this team, of course, is this was that team that had Josh Donaldson back when he knew how to hit. Jose Bautista, Encarnacion. Remember this team, Russell Martin, so on and so forth. I remember watching this team in the postseason, Jose Reyes. And let's see if we can figure out who they had. Yeah, they had Mark Burley, R.A. Dickey, who was the ageless man by that time. Not necessarily the best pitching stuff I've ever seen, but I would say probably above average and definitely above average defensively. I didn't know this. They had Troy Tulowitzki as well. Remember him from Colorado a couple years before this. This is a good offense. This is a team that played very, very well offensively, and I'm pretty sure if we look at its OPS plus rating, yes, 115 was the rating. This was a team that played very, very well offensively. In other words, our eyes are not deceiving us, and they had some very good years, including this one by Donaldson, a good year by Encarnacion, and a good year by Jose Bautista. Then you had Colabello off the bench, Devon Travis, and Danny Valencia. Unfortunately, Tulowitzki never quite did what he did in Colorado elsewhere. And then guys like this, Darwin Barney, I'm not quite sure I even know who that is, and so on and so forth. This was a good team. This was a good team that is not remembered, however, because of this series where they lost to the Kansas City Royals in 6 games. I must have watched this 2015. I was in China at the time. I would have been in Beijing. I must have watched at least some of these games, and because I had gone there straight from Ottawa, Canada, I was probably rooting for the Blue Jays and was probably a little bit frustrated that the Blue Jays ended up not doing so well. They had a couple of big games, including this big win in Game 3, which made the series 2-1. I'm wondering if this is this is the game that they almost fell apart at. I think it was in the ALDS that they had one of those big games. At any rate, I'd have to go back and watch it all again. This is the way that it sort of fell apart for them, though, in the very end in Game 6 in Kansas City. And they did have a chance when Russell Martin got a base hit and was replaced by Dalton Pompey, who stole second and stole third, and probably should have tried to steal home, as the pitcher, Wade Davis, ended up striking out 2 guys and then getting Josh Donaldson to a ground out for the out. And so that is how the 7th best team in American League history, according to the Domination Index, went down. Now, I know this isn't much of a history lesson. Some of you probably actually paid attention to this series, unlike me. But that's sort of the way that it went down. That was a very, very interesting thing to look back at because I tell you, this Blue Jays team is a team that's definitely underrated. If you're going to a tournament, you want a team that has a great offense that could play well, especially if you have a game that is adjusting for things like, offense relative to the league, like you're playing Diamond Mine Baseball. Watch out for the 2015 Toronto Blue Jays. This is a team that could do well. Anyway, so with all of that, we're going to come back from time to time here to the Domination Index, look at a couple of these other teams, and see if we can find any other examples of teams that are sleepers that we don't think about that at least statistically look really good and are up there with the big boys. So we'll have more of that later on, and I'll talk with you tomorrow. Bye-bye.